movement. This word is becoming more and more characteristic of people's careers. But we don't move around empty-handed, especially later in our careers. When we change jobs, as so many of us do throughout our careers, what do we carry with us? This is the big question that I think about in my research. When I was in my early 30s, I had the opportunity to take 6 months off, what I call the best 6 months of my life. I had been working for 3M in product management and marketing, and I decided it was time for a major career change. This was in the mid-90s, and I had been hearing all this buzz about these sexy new high-tech startups. So I thought, maybe I'd try marketing for one of them. Now I was pretty confident. I was in that sweet spot where you have some significant experience, but you're still pretty young, and I had this blue chip resume. So I applied to a bunch of startups, and I got nothing. No interest, no response, no nothing. So I finally got somebody from a startup to sit down with me for an informational interview. And he told me, look, no startup is going to be interested in you. You are too far away. Maybe if you were working for a small company or an IT company, in those days it was all IT startups, then you'd be closer. But coming from this big old manufacturing company, you're not going to be able to make the transition. Now, I don't know if he was right or wrong, because I never did end up working for a startup. But his comment really got me thinking about career transitions and what we take with us when we move. So this ultimately became the core of my research agenda when I made what I hope is my last major career transition into academia. So what do we take with us? Well, on one level, it's obvious. We take our knowledge and skills, what social scientists call our human capital. You might also realize that we take our relationships and our reputations, our social capital. This is correct, it's all good stuff. But here's what makes the question interesting. While we're packing away our human capital and our social capital into our career bags, some other stuff jumps in too. Stuff like cognitive and behavioral habits, like assumptions about what's the right way to behave. So why does this matter? Well, firms hire for related experience. If you have just exactly the experience that they're looking for, like doing the same thing for a competitor, they assume you're going to hit the ground running. But that isn't strictly true. With my collaborators, Stephanie Wilk and Nancy Rothbard, I once studied insurance adjusters working in call centers. Now, you might think that these jobs are pretty standardized. They are. And that the experience that you gain working in one insurance call center is going to transfer pretty seamlessly to another insurance call center, especially one that's located across the street. What we found, though, was that these experienced workers, well, they certainly hit the ground running in terms of their knowledge about insurance claims, but they stumbled a bit in unexpected ways. You see, they carried with them assumptions about what behaviors and priorities were valued, about the right way, the appropriate ways for insurance call center workers to behave. But these assumptions were learned at the old company, and they didn't quite match what the new company needed. The old company valued efficiency above all else. Both firms really valued customer service, but at the old firm, good customer service was about getting the customer's problem solved and getting them off the phone. At the new company, good customer service was about making the customer feel taken care of and special. So one place that this difference caused issues was in the practice of escalating calls. When a customer had a problem and wanted to talk to a supervisor, employees that were hired from the call center across the street, they resisted because in the past, they had been marked down for escalations. In the call center that we studied, the workers were supposed to escalate calls as soon as they were asked. You don't fight with the customer. So once they saw it, it was obvious, but it took a while for them to figure out that this was happening. And even when they told the workers, it wasn't necessarily easy to adjust. Because the thing about values and assumptions is they become taken for granted, implicit, automatic, right? And they manifest in a number of different behaviors. So you can tell workers to do escalations differently, but what about all those other behaviors you haven't noticed yet? So experience certainly transfers, but it's a bit trickier than you might think. Which brings me to the second point I want to make today. Experience is not exactly like the job you're hiring for, can have some unexpected benefits. Employers tend to take a pretty narrow view of what experience actually matters. I recently heard an interview with Michael Giacchino. He's the composer who wrote the film score for the Star Wars movie Rogue One. He talked about how he got his start in composing scores. And he said that he got his start by becoming a video game producer. See, he had learned that producers hire composers, so he realized he could just hire himself to write music for video games. And so he did, for games like Medal of Honor and Call of Duty. So moving into TV and movies was tougher. And here's what he says. It was one of those moments of my life when I was sitting there going, no one's going to hire me for TV. And literally nobody would, because they kept saying, oh, you're a video game guy. You don't know how to do TV. So it wasn't until producer and director J.J. Abrams, who liked the music from Medal of Honor, hired Giacchino to write music for a new TV show that he was doing, that he was able to make the transition. Since then, he has scored TV shows like Fringe and Lost, which he won an Emmy for, and movies like Jurassic World and Up. He won an Oscar for that one. Clearly, his skills were transferable. Further, there's some evidence to suggest that this kind of transition might even be good for the work that's produced. So social science researchers established pretty firmly that diverse groups of people are better at innovation and problem solving. But more recent research is finding that diverse career histories within a single person can also benefit performance. For example, a recent study found that firms that are led by CEOs who have some career variety, who had worked for different firms, different industries, different functional areas in their past, they were more likely to have novel strategies that are more dynamic and more distinctive, which is key to sustainable competitive advantage. Another study analyzed comic books and found that comic book creators who had worked in multiple genres like superhero, science fiction, Western, they were more likely to write comic books that were outliers in terms of performance, some of the really big hits. Okay. So what this suggests is that defining relatedness a little more broadly might have big benefits. And defining relatedness too narrowly might be becoming a bigger problem as selection moves more toward machine filtering. It's estimated at this point that between 75 and 90% of resumes are filtered out by algorithms before ever being seen by humans. And algorithms, of course, are using rigid and somewhat narrow rules about what kinds of experiences are relevant. So what do we do about it? Well, if you're an employer, maybe you want to think about onboarding a little differently to account for the cognitive habits and the assumptions that your new hires are bringing along with their valuable human and social capital. I'm working on a project right now with Winnie Jiang, and we are thinking about career transitions in terms of friction. So when there's movement across jobs, across occupations, across industries, geographies, it all creates different types and amounts of friction that can interfere with smooth transitions. Reframing the issue of job mobility around friction rather than relatedness can help us start thinking about different solutions to smooth the path, to reduce the friction. So maybe onboarding for experienced workers should look different from onboarding for new college graduates. Maybe onboarding should help experienced workers unlearn some of the habits and assumptions that don't work in the new environment, so that they can acquire new ones that do. Employers that recognize that people's interesting career backgrounds, and everyone's got one, employers that recognize the value in these interesting career backgrounds are able to take advantage of a wider and more diverse pool of applicants. And they can help these applicants use their diverse experiences when they'll be helpful, like when the tasks require creativity or novel thinking. So, baggage. The word has so many negative connotations, but maybe we want to think about it less in terms of a heavy weight that we're dragging around and more in terms of a toolkit. Throughout your career, you are adding experiences, knowledge, ways of thinking into your toolkit. You're not going to use everything for every job that you have, but take out the experiences that serve you when you need them. You want to be thoughtful about what your experiences have given you, and you want to use them to move toward your career aspirations. Thank you.